If you want to know why a clinic director, a PT clinic director position is not for you, this is a perfect episode for you. Everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Welcome all new listeners, and welcome back to those who have heard my content in the past. If you want to know why a clinic director, a PT clinic director position is not for you, this is a perfect episode for you. So before I go into the podcast, I want to share what is new, what is happening in life. For those of you who know, my computer was broken last week. I'm excited to finally get it back, and there's a big difference from my old computer. So I am ready to rock and roll. Shout out to Apple for Apple Care. That is amazing. In this instance, it was in my benefit. What else is new? My kids are growing up. Jacob is still not walking. Zach is done with flag football, and Alex is crushing gymnastics, and my wife Stephanie is crushing me at workouts in CrossFit. So that's what's new. What is better? Life is good. Just training very, very consistently and learning a lot of lessons. So today I want to talk about what it is a clinic director position for everybody. No. Who is it for? And then today we're going to talk about who it's not for. Why did I come up with this podcast? I came off of conversations I'm having with clinicians, I'm having with my staff, my team. And the more I notice is that a lot of us, we're all actually going through the same phases of professional development. For some of you, you're a new grad and you're trying to get to a certain position, a certain status, a certain credential. For some of you, you're established and you're like, I've done the work. I can treat athletes. Now I want to go one more step up and I want to be a clinic manager. Or if you're a student, you're like, I literally don't know where to start. How do I get there faster? So for many of you, you're along that spectrum. And I get that. The more I've been in practice, the more I realize there's just so many trends in all of us. We're all very similar. We're not the same. We're very similar in that we all aspire to have a certain view of our professional development, a certain reputation. And the more I see and I practice and I lead other people on my team, I mentor other physical therapists at different stages, I see there's just trends. So here's the trend I'm talking about now in the later stages. So when we talk about, leadership, most people think that if you're kind of like the best PT, you're going to be like the best leader. You're going to be the best clinic director because you can then teach other people. And that's the worst decision ever. And what I mean by that is, let's put this in context of sports, right? So if you think about Tom Brady, Michael Jordan, some Wayne Gretzky, some of the best in their sport, right? Whoever you perceive that to be. Ultimately, what you have to decide is, if they're a good athlete, does that make them a good coach? No, it actually has no correlation. It just means that they knew the game, their genetics, their nervous input, their strength, their ability to generate force and accuracy or coordination was just different. So for them to translate that into others doing the same means nothing. It's not a direct correlation. It may be an association, but it doesn't allow them to be a good coach. It gives them a better framework. They've got a good reputation, but the skill set of coaching and leadership is a whole different domain. It's a whole profession. So when people are learning and they're like, hey, I'm a good physical therapist, I should be next in line to be a good clinic director. False. You cannot come in with that idea. If you come in with that idea, you're set up for failure. What I mean by that is, you can't have that attitude. And the more I coach and mentor physical therapists, I realize that being a good mentor and leader is something very different than being a good clinician. You have to separate those two. And when you separate those two, then we have two different skill sets. And I'm going to lay this path out for you. And is this for you and why it's not for you? So as I have more and more conversations with clinicians, I realize that there is this gap of two different skill sets. And we talked about a good athlete doesn't make a good coach, and a good coach doesn't make a good athlete, but they have two separate jobs. One is to produce results on the field. Another one is to have others produce results on the field. And those are completely different points. And you can also think about a good coach that you've developed, you've worked with. Maybe as a kid, you grew up and there were some that you just gravitated towards it. Like they had a great personality. They could coach. They were firm. They could produce results, but not like, they were firm, but fair. They wouldn't, call you out, or if they did, you needed it, but they knew when to push and pull. They knew when to push you a little bit, and they knew when to pull back and just watch you. And that is an art. That's a skill and an art. And it's literally like an art. The coaching and leadership is, I would consider, an art. And just because you've been a good clinician, when have you had time to study what a good coach or leader does? Never. You know how to mobilize, you know how to stretch, you know how to give a home exercise program, you know how to produce results. But what you haven't done is helped other people develop results. So here's the path. Here's what I see more than anything else. In your first few years as a clinician, you're just learning how to treat. Like, you're learning regional improvement. How do I mobilize this? How do I reduce knee pain? Maybe how is my back connected to my knee? How is the ankle pain going to get better right before a game? How am I going to manage this back pain 4 weeks out from an event? How am I going to get this post-operative shoulder back to insert sport, baseball, in 8 months? You're good at getting somebody to do something, a patient or an athlete to have an outcome. Great. Then you realize there's more to them than just the body part. You're learning to treat just the body part, the knee, the shoulder, whatever it is. And then you realize, man, I can fix a shoulder, but every shoulder is connected to a different brain. And what I mean by that is everybody responds differently to that same stimulus you gave, that same exercise, that same mobilization, but you had to grade it based on their sensitivity, their pain scale, how they came in that day. So that region, yes, you learn how to treat the region, but then now you have to learn how to treat the person behind that. And at first you're learning to treat regions, step one. Then you learn how to treat people. And you're like, wait a minute. So just because they have 2 knees, 2 shoulders, whatever it is, doesn't mean they're all the same. And then you realize you have to tailor the region specific treatment according to the person. So then you're starting to learn to treat people. And then you learn how to manage them. You forecast what's coming in. You're like, oh, I've seen this before. I can generally get an idea of what this is. And you start to get that mastery point where you're like, oh, I can see it. Like, people come in with a certain history, certain surgeon. You're like, I generally know the timeline. You can give them really good progressions, and you're within, 80 to 90% accuracy. That's when you learn to manage people. So first you learn to manage the joint or the region. Then you learn to manage, then you learn to treat the person, not just the region. And then you learned how to manage the person. These are all different phases. And I would even say like they go probably in years of like 2. So the first 6 years, you're finally like figuring out, you're like, oh, routine, I got it. They're certain personality type. I can totally manage this. They're pro athlete, high school athlete. I can totally get them. And then somebody approaches you and you're like, now I want you to share what you do with this human being over here and teach them to do the exact same thing. And what you don't realize is it took you 6 years to learn how to manage people. Patience. It took you 4 to 6 years to learn how to manage patients and athletes. But what you haven't done is learn how to manage or treat coworkers to then apply that to patients. Different world, whole different world, because you added a step between the outcome. Now you want that patient to get better. Now you're telling somebody to do something. Their interpretation of that is now going to be applied. And that's going to change based on, their personality, how they grew up, how their learning style is, and all those things. And so the danger I see with a lot of clinicians is that we allow younger clinicians to skip steps and go straight to a PT clinic director position. And if you're a young professional in your first 2 years, please don't get offended by that. What you need to realize is you're still learning how to treat a region, and then learn how to treat the person, and then learn how to manage them. If we skip those steps and you're like, well, you're a good clinician, you can treat really good body parts, then companies will then put that person in a position where now teach other people to do that. And you've skipped so many steps on how to teach a person to execute on a task and hold them accountable and help them grow. And it's not just because you say things, people do them. It's learning how to put people in a position that sets them up for success. Learning style, visual, verbal. You have to understand so many steps behind that. And later down the line, I'll create a course for leadership positions and people who want to aspire to be there. I've learned over the last 8 years now of growing sports performance in helping professionals grow at every level is very challenging. And as a leader, you have to grow tremendously and understand what people's expectations are, set them, and actually help them grow. And when in those first three steps, learn to treat a body part, learn to treat a person, learn how to manage them. Now you're going to go on to leadership positions like a PT clinic director. Now you have to learn how to teach others. Teach others to treat body parts. Then you have to learn to teach others how to treat people. And then you have to learn to teach other people how to manage people. If it took you 1 to 2 years per step, imagine what's going to take them. And so I think people get frustrated and they say like, well, I thought PT clinic managers are going to be so much easier just because I'm the best clinician. It put me in the position. Why can't they just do it? It's because you're trying to be Michael Jordan and apply Michael Jordan principles to, you know, the bench player, like, or the superstar, but who doesn't have the same skill set or doesn't have the same nervous output, doesn't have the same everything. They're just different than you. We're all different. It doesn't make them better or worse. It's just they don't have the same learning style. They don't have the same framework that you're coming in with. And a lot of clinical directors will say, you know, I thought it was going to be easy. What else do I need to do? Why don't they listen to me? What is it that helps people click? And it's not one thing, it's not two things, it's understanding humans. And the more that you see more patients and athletes, the more you understand how people process. And then when you start teaching people how to teach others, then that's where the game changes a little bit. You actually have to do less and less of the this is how you do it, but this is why you do it. And I mentioned this on a podcast 2 or 3 episodes ago. You know, really good physical therapists teach patients and athletes not what to do, but what to look for. So what I mean by that is the same thing with clinicians. The more I grow clinicians, the more I understand. I'm not going to tell you mobilize grade 1 here at stage 1 at week 2, increase to state, you know, grade 3s, increase to range of motion by week 4. That's a protocol. You can Google that yourself. What I will say is I'll give you a better framework, assuming you can figure all that out. What I will say is at week 3, you're going to have some edema. Make sure they don't have any issues. I'm going to tell you the directions to look and what bumpers to apply, so you know what yellow lights are coming at your way. And the more you can apply that to people, the more they can be independent and not be dependent on you. And that's what a really good leader is. They can develop people without being dependent. And that is a skill set. So after you master that, you learn to teach others how to manage others. And then here's the next step. And this is one of the toughest ones. Learn to manage peers and colleagues. Now, this is tough because people have a lot in their personal lives, and a lot of people will bring that to work. And you know, that's a company-wide challenge with any company. And as long as you have the same core values in line with your whole team and your company, then you're on the same page. And ultimately, everybody has to be in line with that. So when you're managing others, you're helping them understand that the feedback you're giving them is not a personal. It's nothing more than everyone needs to abide by these house rules, and everyone needs to be on the same page in order for that patient and that athlete to have the same experience and have a really good, tremendous outcome based on who they see. So when you start to have a team who sees this and you're a clinic manager, most of the time you're looking at numbers, or you're looking at metrics, and you're like, well, this person's not performing, they're not here, blah, blah, blah. But it's not their performance. It's usually the personal challenge that they have that's interfering with their ability to work at a high level. And so you have to get to know your team, care about them tremendously, treat them as a person and not just a clinician. It's funny how we all treat our patients as people. We aspire to do that, right? We're like, oh, you got to treat your patients like a person and not, you know, not just a number. And that's 100% correct. However, when you're in leadership and you go into a clinic manager, you're like, oh, look at the numbers here. They're not doing great here. They're doing great. Hold on. They're a person first. So treat them as such. And I think a lot of PT clinic directors they go in a different route, and it's not something I would highly recommend. And just purely looking at them from an objective standpoint, I think there's the qualitative components too of the human right behind that. And once you can do that, they build trust in clinic directors. And for some of you, you're listening to this, you're like, I'm not a clinic director, but you can appreciate that as an employee, as a staff member. Think about most people leave jobs because of direct reports, because of managers. People leave jobs because of people, not because of the job. They literally leave it because of people. The people at their facility, that whether it was a team or the direct report, they just didn't enjoy being with, right? They didn't enjoy their learning style, their leadership style. And the more I see this, the more it's transparent. It's very obvious. And as I grow more leaders, I grow more clinicians, I understand that there's common principles, that the same principles are applied to patients and athletes is the same that should be applied in leadership and management in PT clinic director roles. So if you don't appreciate that as a staff member, whenever you get to that point as a PT clinic director, it's going to be very easy to forget that, because you're so involved in producing metrics and objectives that you lose sight of the human behind that. And, I've been guilty of that in the past. And as I grow and more, I realize that. And that's why I'm sharing this with you guys, because the best thing you can do is know this going into it, because then you have better expectations and you see like, wow, my manager doesn't do this really well. They don't treat me well. They don't ask me how my day was. They're strictly on my performance. And so when you get to that point, the way you get better is not by doing what was doing to you. It's not, because if you had a rough childhood, the worst thing you can do is apply that to your kids. Just because you had it rough doesn't mean your kids have to have it rough. So just because you had it rough as a staff employee, a physical therapist, doesn't mean that you do that same thing to others when you're a PT clinic director. The best clinicians are the ones who can take things like that and lead by example, treat them as a human, keep them high, understand that they have personal lives behind that. And if they can keep that outside and keep it professional, so many good things happen, and you're just constantly having that conversation with people. And I had a meeting this week, and one of the resonating themes of this was to be present. And so what I mean by that is, as a parent, as you can tell, I'm in parent mode. I have 3 kids, and my wife and I really work hard to have a positive impact on our kids. And, we won't be there at every stage for them to make the best decisions, but what we can do is instill great values in them. And so I think one of the best things that we're doing right now, we've talked about, both of us, is that just be present as much as possible. Just be present, physical and like actually be present there, verbally, psychologically, everything. And it's the same with staff. And the more you can check in with the people around you, the better things are. And it's just being present, checking in. How are you? How's life? Not just like, hey, how's your athlete? How's your patient? It's like everything else beyond that. So PT clinic director positions are not for people who have a hard time with this. If you don't love and enjoy developing others or caring about others, and you're like, I get wiped out with just treating, there's no way I can do that. And so that's a great thing coming in. So as young clinicians, think about this. If you've had no training on leadership development, you're going to apply how you learned onto others. And what that does, it creates a very tough culture within a PT clinic. And some of you can be shaking your head. You're like, man, I was a PT clinic aide, or I've been a student there on one of my rotations, or I'm currently in a clinic that does this. And so it starts with you making a change. So when you get to a position like that, that's where you can have an impact. That's where you can have an influence. And what I'm saying is, I hope to deter the ones who thought that they wanted this PT clinic director position, but also to push those who just have a little glimpse into it, like, I could totally do that. Great. But know what you're getting into. You're into a leadership role, not for more money, not for more responsibility. It's because you want to literally be passionate about supporting people as their professional growth goes on. But that doesn't mean by just telling them what to do. It's telling them where to look. Truly, that's what a leadership role is in a PT clinic director. So what is leadership at its root? It's helping other people grow and be successful. This is a tough one. My leadership team, we've had this conversation. The more you grow up in leadership in a clinic manager role, the more selfless you have to be. And what I mean by that is you have to put others before you, because we're all looking through a lens. And the more we can see that lens widen, other people might not see it in the same lens. And so as you get into a larger lens of seeing like really how, a clinic runs, or you working on patients and athletes, and you can see it from a different perspective, you can see it further back. It doesn't mean they're wrong. They just are seeing it from a different lens. And all you want to do is share that lens with them. And so it's admitting that you're wrong, admitting that you won't always have the answers. It's being selfless. And so the more you have other people underneath you, you're more responsible for it, the more selfless you get. It's just like parenting 101. So just realize that that's what you're getting into. So the couple lessons I've taken away from mentoring other PTs and aspiring clinic directors and current clinic directors, Take your time. This is a long-term development, but you're constantly trying to develop yourself. You're not going to be a game changer right from the beginning. And I think your company will expect that, especially if you're younger in your professional career. Take your time. It is a long path. Invest in your personal education. So take courses on your own. Who cares about CEUs? Just take the course. Like if you are caring about CEUs, you're like in the wrong profession. You're not trying to be a leader. You're trying to be like, you're nickel and diming. I don't care what your finances are, whatever it is that you need to do. Because if you really care about education and developing others, you're going to be selfless. You're going to figure it out. Who cares about the CEUs and leadership development? Figure it out, make it happen, because the gratification that you will get off of being a great leader is worth it 10 times over. So I personally invest in a lot of money myself in personal education without CEUs. It's just part of the game. It's part of the personal development. And you'll have to take one comment that you need to take yourself is it's my fault. It is your fault. It is my fault. Understanding that you'll being part of selfless is understanding that because other people don't understand it, you're going to have to at some point say, I'll take that. How can we better, like, where is it that I messed up? Where is it that you were challenged? So don't think because you're in a higher position that puts you higher authority. It actually just puts you in a position where you're like, it's now going to be more so in your fault. For future leaders and current leaders, be firm but fair. I think people understand it when you put it in that context. I'm not trying to be mean. This can't happen anymore. You need to work on this. Or great job with that. I would change it up a little bit and, do this, this, this. When you're firm and fair, people are like, they're a great leader. Think about coaches you've had before, soccer, lacrosse, whatever it is. The ones who were firm but fair, those are the ones you appreciated the most, not the super aggressive, harsh ones, or the, fluffy, soft ones over here who were like, oh, you're, maybe the best athlete or whatever it is, but they never really told you what it is. You never grew. So being firm but fair is a key component to that. And just remember, being a physical therapist and being a leader is two different things. So just remember, you were a new grad and you finally figured it out over 4 to 6 years how to be a veteran PT. And now when you're a clinic manager, you're brand new at that. So you are a new grad at being a manager. So just because you're good to PT doesn't make you a good manager. You're brand new, you're a rookie. So consider that. So those are my lessons that I've taken away, and just know that there's going to be multiple stages in multiple years. So it can be 4 to 6 years, and then there's another 4 to 6 years of just learning how to manage others. But just know there's a journey, and there are courses for that. As I mentioned, I will probably create these because they just don't exist in the profile of physical therapist specific. They are like grand scheme leadership type of courses, but ultimately it's learning how to treat others, manage others, and push them throughout their journey. Because right now you're in the journey of developing. So people like myself are helping develop you. And then when you take those principles and apply them, you're like, man, why don't they just work? Because they don't apply to everybody. So you always have to have a big toolbox for managing and leading, because everyone's so different, circumstances changes. But ultimately, you're doing the same thing. You're providing different options. You're allowing people to grow. You're giving them bumpers. You're doing all these things, not just telling them what to do. And so the better you get at servicing people in physical therapy is the same. You will get that in management. So just because you're a good clinician, don't think that you're going to be a good clinic manager. Not the same thing. And that's where I see a lot of businesses have challenges, and you don't want to be put in that position because that's your name. That's your reputation. You don't want to be put into that. You want to be built for success and ready for it. Not just because somebody offered it, because you get great outcomes. It doesn't put you in that position. So you should be equipped now with, at the very least, saying, maybe not right now. Can you give me like 1 or 2 years so I can develop myself? Oh, a company would totally admire that. Be like, oh, okay, you're at least seeing the greater light. And that puts you in a better position to succeed, not just overstep and, take the fast route. So there you have it. For those of you who have been in my world, I'm so excited to see you next month, July 23rd, 24th, at my Strength and Conditioning Summit in San Diego. I'll cover some of this because some of strength and conditioning coaching is very much that. It's leadership development. So I'll go through some of this teaching, education, leadership, strength and conditioning principles, add in PT specific into that so you can progress people through, and then eventually be able to guide and support other strength and conditioning specialists with transitions into performance. So excited to see you there. If you need information, email me, Dr. Chris at drchrisgarcia.com. I hope you aspiring clinic directors are taking a tremendous amount from this podcast, and those who are clinic directors currently, you need to learn that this is different than treating. And I think if you've kind of figured that out by now, and then now you got to figure out how to support the people so you can be more successful, and ultimately they are more successful. It's such a gratifying feeling. It's one of my best feelings on the planet. Sometimes I'm great and you're on a high mountain, and sometimes you're like, man, I could have done better that day. So I totally get it. You're normal, and it's a normal process. So I just want to share that with you guys. That was my lessons for the week, and I hope you guys appreciate it. And wherever you are in this world, I hope you are staying active, healthy, and living